November 1944, Camp Aliceville, Alabama. The German nurse picked up the jar with shaking hands, not from fear, from confusion. Helga Brandt had survived Rommel's Afrika Korps. She'd pulled shrapnel from screaming soldiers. She'd eaten rations so moldy they turned her stomach green. She'd watched men die in desert heat, with nothing but sand for graves. She thought she'd seen everything war could throw at her. Then America gave her peanut butter. She stared at the brown paste inside the glass jar. It looked like axle grease. It smelled strange, nutty, sweet, completely alien. Across the table, 33 other German women, prisoners of war, all of them, stared at identical jars with identical confusion. An American guard walked by, eating it, just scooped it straight from the jar with a spoon. No bread, no shame. She ate it like it was ice cream and smiled. "Best thing in the world," the guard said. "You'll love it." The German women thought she was mocking them, some kind of American joke. Feed the prisoners machine grease and watch them suffer. But then Helga noticed something that made her blood run cold. The American guards weren't eating different food. They were eating the exact same thing. Same bread, same soup, same mysterious brown paste. Officers, cooks, guards, everyone ate it. Some even fought over it. These Americans, they actually loved this stuff. And that's when Helga realized something terrifying. Everything she'd been told about America might be a lie, because back in Germany, the newspapers said Americans were starving. The radio said their economy had collapsed. The propaganda films showed breadlines and poverty and weakness, but starving people don't make butter out of peanuts. What happened next changed 34 women forever. Within 3 days, Helga would be sneaking extra jars back to her bunk, trading her mother's silver earrings for 4 spoonfuls, lying awake at night wondering what else the Reich had lied about. Within 2 weeks, the camp would run out of peanut butter because German prisoners consumed 3 times the expected supply. Within a month, a complete underground economy would form, where peanut butter became more valuable than cigarettes, more precious than gold, more powerful than any propaganda. And by the time these women returned to destroy Germany in 1947, they would carry something more dangerous than any weapon: the truth. Want to know what happened when Helga took her first bite? When 40 jars vanished in a single breakfast? When enemy prisoners started learning English just to read the label? When American abundance accidentally destroyed Nazi propaganda 1 spoonful at a time? The train stopped with a loud screech, metal against metal. The sound echoed through the Alabama countryside. It was November 1944. The air was cool but humid, different from the dry heat of North Africa where these women had been captured. 34 German women stepped off the train at Camp Aliceville. Their boots hit American soil for the first time. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were Wehrmacht auxiliaries, nurses who had bandaged wounds in field hospitals, signals operators who had sent messages across battle lines, secretaries who had typed orders for generals, women who had served the Reich in ways that did not require pulling triggers. Now they were prisoners of war in a country they had been taught to hate. Helga Brandt was 26 years old. She had been a nurse in Rommel's Afrika Korps. She had seen men die in the desert sand. She had eaten rations so bad they made her sick. She had been captured when Allied forces overran her medical station. For 3 months, she had moved through processing camps, first in Algeria, then Morocco, then onto a ship crossing the Atlantic Ocean. She expected the worst from Americans. Back in Germany, the newspapers had painted a clear picture. America was weak. Its people were starving. The Great Depression had broken them. They had no food, no strength, no future. And they hated Germans. Any prisoner sent there would suffer. But Camp Aliceville did not look like suffering. The camp had been built in 1942 to hold captured enemy soldiers. At its peak, it held over 6,000 German prisoners. The women's section was smaller, separated by fences, but built to the same standard. Wooden barracks with real beds, showers with hot water, a medical clinic, a recreation area. Helga looked around. This is a prison, she thought. The guards led them to the mess hall for their first meal. The building was large and clean. Long wooden tables stretched across the room. The smell hit them immediately. Bread, meat, something cooking on stoves. And underneath it all, a strange, nutty smell that none of them recognized. They sat down on benches. American kitchen staff, some of them women, brought out plates, soup with vegetables, white bread, soft and fresh, canned peaches in sweet syrup. Meat that was actually identifiable as meat, and on every table sat glass jars filled with brown paste. Helga stared at hers. The substance inside was thick. It clung to the sides of the jar like grease. The color reminded her of mud, or maybe machine oil. A paper label said 2 words in English: peanut butter. "What is this?" asked Ingrid, the woman next to her. Ingrid was 22, a signals operator from Hamburg. She picked up the jar and turned it in her hand. Nobody knew. They watched the American staff. A young woman in a kitchen apron walked by with her own sandwich. She had spread the brown paste thickly on bread. She took a big bite and chewed happily, like it was the most normal thing in the world. A guard named Betty noticed their confusion. She walked over with a smile. "Peanut butter," she said slowly, pointing at the jar. "You eat it. It's good." She opened a jar, took a spoon, scooped out a large portion, and ate it directly. No bread, just peanut butter on a spoon. She closed her eyes like she was enjoying something wonderful. The German women watched in complete confusion. "Americans eat this," Helga whispered in German, "like this, every day." Another guard, an older woman named Ruth, overheard through a translator. She laughed kindly. "Honey, I've eaten peanut butter every day since I was 5 years old. My kids eat it. My husband takes it to work. Every family in America has a jar in their kitchen." Helga did the math in her head. Every family, there were over 130 million Americans. If every family had peanut butter, that meant millions of jars. Millions and millions, but they told us Americans were starving. That first meal, the German women ate the bread, they ate the soup, they ate the peaches, but the jars of peanut butter sat untouched, too strange, too suspicious. Perhaps it was some kind of trick. "It looks like axle grease," one woman muttered. Others laughed nervously, but Helga noticed something. The American staff did not eat different food. They ate the same things, same bread, same soup, same peanut butter. Guards and prisoners shared the same meals. In German camps, that would never happen. Prisoners ate scraps, guards ate well. The difference showed who had power, but here the lines blurred in ways that made no sense. That night, lying in her bunk, Helga could not sleep. Not because of fear, not because of discomfort. The bed was actually soft. The blanket was warm. She could not sleep because of those jars. Why did Americans love that strange brown paste so much? Why did they eat it with such joy? And why did they give it to prisoners like it was nothing special? She had no answers. But tomorrow she would watch more carefully. She would learn. And if the Americans kept eating it like that, maybe she would try it herself. Just one small taste, just to understand. What she did not know was that one taste would change everything, not just for her, but for every woman in that barracks. The next morning came with grey skies and the smell of coffee drifting through the camp. Helga woke early. She had not slept well. Her mind kept returning to those jars, the brown paste, the way Americans ate it like treasure. She told herself it was just curiosity, nothing more. At breakfast, the mess hall filled quickly. The German women took their seats. Same tables as yesterday. Same white bread. Same strange jars sitting in the center like a test nobody wanted to take. Helga watched the American kitchen workers. A young woman named Dorothy was preparing sandwiches for the guards. She spread peanut butter on one slice of bread. Then she opened another jar and spread something red on the second slice. Strawberry jam. She pressed the slices together and wrapped it in paper. PB&J, Dorothy said to another worker. Best lunch there is, peanut butter and jam. Together, Helga filed this information away. For 15 minutes, the German women ate everything except the peanut butter. The bread disappeared, the eggs disappeared, the coffee was drunk to the last drop, but the jars remained sealed. Then Ingrid spoke. "I cannot stand this anymore," she said quietly. "I must know why they love it so much." She reached for a jar. The women at her table went silent. Ingrid twisted the lid. It popped open with a soft sound. The smell rose immediately. It was rich, nutty, a little sweet, unlike anything from German kitchens, not unpleasant, but deeply foreign, like smelling a spice from a country you had never visited. Ingrid took a knife and spread a thin layer on bread, very thin, almost invisible. She lifted the bread to her mouth. Everyone watched. She took the smallest possible bite. She chewed slowly. Her face showed nothing at first. Then her eyebrows rose. She chewed more, swallowed, looked at the bread in her hand like it had betrayed her. "Well?" Helga asked. "Is it terrible?" Ingrid shook her head slowly. "No." "Is it good?" Ingrid took another bite, a bigger one this time. She chewed with her eyes closed. "It is very good," she finally said. "It is salty and sweet at the same time. It sticks to your mouth. It fills you up. It tastes like—" She struggled for words. "It tastes like energy, like strength." Helga felt something shift in the room. Other women leaned forward, hands reached for jars, lids twisted open one by one. The nutty smell spread across the entire table. One woman tried it and nodded. Another tried it and smiled for the first time since capture. A third woman, a nurse named Britta, who had barely spoken in weeks, tasted it and whispered, "Mein Gott." Within 10 minutes, Helga's table had emptied 2 jars completely. She finally tried it herself. The texture was strange, thick and sticky. It clung to the roof of her mouth, but the flavor was remarkable. Rich and deep, salty enough to satisfy, sweet enough to comfort. Her body responded instantly. After months of poor rations, her starving cells recognized real nutrition. Protein, fat, calories. Her body knew what her mind did not. This food could keep you alive. She took another bite, then another. By the end of breakfast, something extraordinary had happened. Every jar on every table was empty. 47 jars consumed in a single morning. American kitchen staff stood watching with wide eyes. Yesterday, they would not touch it, one cook said. Today, they ate everything we had. Dorothy laughed and shook her head. Peanut butter does that, it converts everyone eventually. A supply sergeant checked his inventory later that morning. The women's section had consumed nearly 3 times the expected amount. He wrote a confused note in his report. German female prisoners have developed extreme preference for peanut butter, requesting increased supply. The camp's records, now held in the National Archives, show that peanut butter consumption in the women's section jumped 340% in the first week, a statistic so unusual that administrators in Washington requested confirmation. That afternoon, the mess hall made an announcement through a translator. Due to high demand, peanut butter would be rationed, 1 jar per table per meal, no exceptions. The German women protested immediately. "1 jar is not enough," Ingrid said through the translator. "We need more." The American officer looked confused. "Yesterday, you refused to eat it." "Yesterday, we did not understand," Ingrid replied. "Today, we understand. We want more." Helga sat quietly, thinking about what had just happened. 34 women who had been taught to distrust everything American had just begged for more peanut butter. Not because they were forced, because they wanted it. In Germany, such desire would be seen as weakness. But here, the Americans seemed pleased. They smiled, they nodded, they promised to request additional supplies. That night, Helga wrote in a small notebook she kept hidden. "The brown paste is called peanut butter. Americans eat it every day. They make it from peanuts, which are cheap and common here. They have so many peanuts that they turn them into butter. We were told America had no food. This was a lie." She paused, her pencil hovering over the paper. What else was a lie? She did not write more, but the question burned in her mind, and she knew she was not the only one asking it, because as the women returned to their barracks that night, clutching their rationed portions, something had changed beyond their taste buds. A small crack had appeared in the wall of beliefs they had carried across the ocean, and cracks, once started, tend to spread. Within 2 weeks, peanut butter changed everything inside Camp Aliceville. It started small. A woman named Gerda offered her dessert to Ingrid in exchange for half a spoonful of peanut butter. Ingrid agreed. The trade happened quietly, under the table, like a secret transaction. But secrets do not stay secret in a prison camp. By the 3rd week, a complete economy had formed. Peanut butter became the most valuable item in the women's section, more valuable than cigarettes, more valuable than soap, more valuable than the small chocolates that occasionally appeared in Red Cross packages. The women called it Brawner's gold, brown gold. Helga watched this economy grow with fascination. She had studied economics briefly before the war. She understood supply and demand. But she never expected to see these principles play out over jars of American nut paste. The mathematics were simple. Each table received 1 jar per meal. 3 meals meant 3 jars per day, shared among 8 to 10 women. This worked out to roughly 3 tablespoons per woman daily. Not enough. Never enough. So, trading began. Cigarettes were the first currency to fall. Before peanut butter, cigarettes ruled the camp economy. They could buy extra bread, better blankets, preferred work assignments. American guards traded them, prisoners hoarded them. But now, a pack of 20 cigarettes could only buy 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. Within a month, cigarettes had lost half their trading value. Camp records from December 1944 show that cigarette trades dropped by 62%, while food-based trades increased dramatically. A new hierarchy emerged based on peanut butter wealth. Women who worked in the kitchen had advantages. They saw the jars first. Sometimes a lid was loose, sometimes a jar was slightly damaged. These imperfect jars disappeared before reaching the mess hall. Kitchen workers became the richest women in camp. Helga heard stories of elaborate trades. One woman traded her wedding ring for 6 jars. Another traded a gold bracelet she had hidden from guards. A third woman offered to wash another prisoner's clothes for a month in exchange for daily peanut butter portions. "We have become crazy," Britta said one evening. "Trading gold for groundnuts. Our families would not believe it." But the hunger was real, not just physical hunger, emotional hunger. The peanut butter represented something beyond nutrition. It represented comfort in a foreign land, pleasure in captivity, a small daily joy in a joyless situation. Maria Schmidt was 41 years old, the oldest woman in the camp. She had been an administrative secretary for a Wehrmacht general in Tunisia. She kept a detailed diary throughout her imprisonment. Years later, her granddaughter donated it to a historical archive in Munich. One entry from December 1944 reads, "I traded my mother's earrings today. Silver with small pearls. She gave them to me when I was 18. I traded them for 4 jars of the American peanut butter. I do not regret it. When I eat it, I feel human again." My mother would understand. She always said that food feeds the soul, not just the body. The American guards noticed the trading but rarely interfered. Some participated themselves. Guard Betty became known for accepting peanut butter as payment for small favors. Extra time in the recreation area, a warmer blanket, a newer pillow. "I shouldn't do it," Betty admitted to another guard. "But have you seen how happy it makes them? They light up like kids at Christmas." The camp commander, Colonel Harold Morrison, documented the phenomenon in his monthly report to Washington. German female prisoners have developed an unusual attachment to peanut butter rations. This attachment has created a stable internal economy that reduces conflicts and improves cooperation. I recommend maintaining current supply levels as a morale management tool. Washington approved increased shipments. By January 1945, the women's section received 40% more peanut butter than standard POW allocations. The decision was practical, not generous. Happy prisoners caused fewer problems, but something deeper was happening beneath the trading and hoarding. The obsession with peanut butter forced the women to interact with their captors. They asked questions. Where does peanut butter come from? How is it made? Why do Americans love it so much? The answers unsettled them. Guard Ruth explained one afternoon. Peanuts grow all over the South, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. Farmers grow millions of acres. We have so many peanuts, we don't know what to do with them all. So we make peanut butter, we make peanut oil, we make peanut candy, we feed peanuts to animals. Millions of acres, so many that they fed peanuts to animals. Ingrid translated for the other women. The barracks went quiet. In Germany, food was rationed strictly. Bread contained sawdust to stretch flour supplies. Meat was rare. Butter was a luxury. Families counted every gram. But America grew so many peanuts they gave them to pigs. Helga remembered the Nazi newspapers, the speeches on the radio. America was weak. America was starving. America would collapse under the weight of its own failure. This was why Germany would win. This was why sacrifice was necessary. Lies, all of it. The realization spread slowly through the barracks like cold water seeping into a basement. It did not come with anger. It came with exhaustion. The exhaustion of women who had believed, truly believed, that their suffering served a purpose. Now they ate brown paste made from surplus nuts, and every spoonful whispered the same terrible truth. "We were fools," Maria wrote in her diary that night. "We believed men who told us the world was a certain way. Now we eat American peanuts and see the world as it truly is. This is the worst kind of awakening, the kind that comes with shame." The trading continued, the hoarding continued, but something else was growing alongside the brown gold economy. doubt. And doubt, once planted, grows roots that reach far deeper than any prison fence. The questions started quietly, whispered between bunks after lights out. If they lied about peanut butter, what else was a lie? Helga heard the whispers every night. Women who had believed in German victory now wondered about German honesty. Women who had trusted their leaders now questioned everything they had been told. It was February 1945. The war was turning badly for Germany. News reached the camp through guards, through new prisoners, through American newspapers left carelessly on tables. Soviet forces were pushing toward Berlin. Allied bombers destroyed German cities nightly. The Reich was crumbling, but for the women at Camp Aliceville, the external war mattered less than the internal one, the war inside their own minds. Ingrid approached Helga one evening. Her face was troubled. "I have been thinking," she said, "about what we were taught." "About what?" "About everything." Ingrid sat on Helga's bunk. "They told us Americans were weak, that their soldiers were cowards, that their economy had failed, that their people starved while rich Jews controlled everything." Helga nodded slowly. She had heard the same things. Everyone had. "But look around us," Ingrid continued. "These Americans have enough food to feed their enemies. They have peanut butter for prisoners. They have white bread every day. They have chocolate and coffee and meat. Their guards are healthy and strong. Their buildings are solid and clean." She paused, struggling with words. "Either everything we were told was wrong, or we are in some kind of dream, And this does not feel like a dream." The camp library became an unexpected battleground for truth. American authorities allowed prisoners access to books and magazines. The goal was education and rehabilitation. The result was demolition of Nazi beliefs. Life magazine arrived monthly. The women saw photographs of American factories producing tanks, planes, and ships in quantities beyond imagination. In 1944 alone, American factories produced 96,318 aircraft. Germany produced 39,807. The difference was staggering. They saw photographs of American farms stretching to horizons, golden wheat, green vegetables, orchards heavy with fruit, cattle by the thousands. They saw photographs of American families eating dinner, tables loaded with food, children drinking milk, mothers serving portions that would feed a German family for days. "This cannot be real," one woman insisted. "It is American propaganda." But Guard Dorothy overheard through the translator. She laughed without cruelty. "Propaganda? Honey, those pictures are from regular families. That's how we live. That's how we've always lived. My family had a farm in Kansas. We threw away more food than you probably ate in a month. Not because we were wasteful, because we had too much. Too much." The concept was almost impossible to understand. In Germany, having enough was a dream. Having extra was a fantasy. Having too much was simply not possible. But Americans had too much. So much that they made butter from peanuts and gave it to enemy prisoners. Maria wrote in her diary, "Today I read that American farmers are paid not to grow food. The government gives them money to leave fields empty. They have so much food that growing more would be a problem. Meanwhile, German children eat soup made from turnips and hope. What kind of world is this?" The psychological impact was severe. Camp medical records show a sharp increase in depression among German prisoners during early 1945, not because of mistreatment, because of realization. Dr. Helen Marsh, the camp's American physician, noted in her medical log, "Several German women have requested treatment for what they describe as confusion sickness. They report difficulty sleeping, loss of appetite despite adequate food, and persistent feelings of shame. Upon examination, these symptoms appear connected to cognitive dissonance between their previous beliefs and current observations. They are experiencing a fundamental worldview collapse." Worldview collapse, a clinical term for watching everything you believed burn to ashes. Helga experienced it herself. She lay awake at night reviewing her memories, the speeches by Nazi officials, the newspaper headlines, the radio broadcasts, the films showing American poverty and German strength. All of it built on lies. She remembered believing that American soldiers would be easy to defeat, that German discipline would overcome American weakness, that the war would end in German victory because God favored the righteous. Now she ate American peanut butter in an American camp while American planes destroyed German cities. "We were children," she told Ingrid one night. "They told us stories, and we believed them, like children believe fairy tales. Little Red Riding Hood and the weak Americans. Not all prisoners accepted this awakening. Some women refused to question their beliefs. They insisted the peanut butter was stolen from occupied countries. They claimed the abundance was fake, designed to confuse prisoners. They held on to their faith in German victory despite all evidence, but they were a minority, and their numbers shrank every day. By March 1945, camp reports noted a significant shift in prisoner attitudes. German women who once refused to speak with American guards now asked them questions. Where did you grow up? What does your family do? How do you live in peacetime? The answers were ordinary: farms, factories, schools, churches, families who ate dinner together and went to movies on weekends. Lives that sounded remarkably like German lives before the madness began. Guard Betty told Helga about her childhood in rural Alabama, playing in fields, eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch, swimming in creeks during summer, going to church on Sundays. "We're not so different," Betty said. "Just regular people born in different places. Regular people, not monsters, not enemies, just people who happen to have more peanuts." This realization was perhaps the cruelest blow of all, because if Americans were regular people, then the war had not been good against evil. It had been madness, simply madness. Spring arrived at Camp Aliceville with warm winds and blooming flowers. The Alabama countryside turned green. Birds sang in trees beyond the fences. The air smelled of fresh grass and distant farms. For the German women, it was their first spring in captivity. But something unexpected was growing alongside the flowers: friendship. It started with small moments. Guard Ruth brought extra jam for the peanut butter. Dorothy taught Ingrid how to make proper PB&J sandwiches. Betty shared photographs of her children with women who missed their own families. These were not grand gestures. They were tiny acts of kindness that slowly erased the line between captor and captive. Helga noticed the change during mealtimes. American staff no longer watched the prisoners with suspicious eyes. They smiled, they waved. They sometimes sat at the same tables and shared stories through translators. "This is wrong," one German woman complained. "They are our enemies. We should not become friendly with enemies." But the complaint had no power. Hunger for human connection was stronger than loyalty to a dying ideology. Guard Betty became particularly close with several prisoners. She was 34 years old, a mother of 2 from Mobile. Her husband worked in a shipyard building destroyers. She had taken the guard job to support her family while he worked long hours. "I never hated Germans," she told Helga one afternoon. "I hated the war. I hated that my brother died in Italy. But hating you wouldn't bring him back. And looking at you, I just see women like me. Women who got caught up in something bigger than themselves." The words hit Helga like cold water. An American woman had lost her brother fighting Germans. Yet here she stood, sharing peanut butter and photographs, treating enemies like guests. In Germany, such behavior would be considered treason, but Americans seemed to operate by different rules. The camp organized English classes in April 1945. American teachers volunteered to help prisoners learn the language. The stated goal was rehabilitation. Prisoners who spoke English could more easily return to productive lives after the war. 47 women enrolled immediately, not for rehabilitation. For survival, they wanted to read labels, understand conversations, ask for more peanut butter without translators. Maria, despite being the oldest prisoner, became the most dedicated student. She practiced vocabulary cards every night. She read children's books borrowed from the camp library. She listened to American radio programs and wrote down words she did not understand. "Language is power," she told younger women. "If we understand them, we understand their world, and their world is clearly different from what we were taught." Her English diary entries from this period survive in the Munich archive. The grammar is imperfect, but the meaning is clear. "Today I learned the word plenty. It means having more than enough. Americans use this word often. They say plenty of food, plenty of time, plenty of everything. In German, we say genug, enough. We do not have a word for plenty, maybe because we never had it. The classes created unexpected bonds. American teachers and German students discovered common ground, favorite books, favorite songs, memories of peaceful childhoods before war destroyed everything. Teacher Margaret Collins was 28 years old, a former school teacher from Tennessee. She taught English 3 afternoons per week. Her students called her Frau Margaret, with affection. "They're just women," she wrote to her mother in May 1945. Some were nurses who saved lives, some were office workers who typed letters. None of them chose to be here. War pushed them like leaves in a storm. I cannot hate leaves for blowing in the wind. The shared meals became more meaningful. Americans and Germans ate the same food at the same tables. Peanut butter sandwiches passed between hands that should have been enemies. Coffee was poured by women whose countries bombed each other's cities. Camp records show that disciplinary incidents dropped by 78% between February and May 1945. Prisoner cooperation increased dramatically. Work assignments were completed without complaint. Medical visits decreased as stress-related illnesses declined. Colonel Morrison noted in his final report, "The women's section has become remarkably peaceful. Prisoners and staff have developed respectful relationships that exceed expectations. Food quality, particularly peanut butter availability, appears directly connected to morale levels. I recommend this approach for future POW management." But the relationships were about more than management. They were about humanity recognizing itself across enemy lines. Helga formed a particular friendship with Dorothy, the kitchen worker, who had first demonstrated PB&J. Dorothy was 23, the same age as Helga. She had grown up poor in rural Alabama. Her family survived the Depression by growing peanuts and selling them to factories. "Peanut butter saved my family," Dorothy said. "Factories paid good money for peanuts. We had nothing else, but we had peanuts. That's how I know it's valuable, not just for eating, for surviving." Helga understood. Survival. Both women knew what it meant to hold on to something that kept you alive. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over. News reached Camp Aliceville by radio. American staff celebrated. Some cried with relief. Husbands and sons might finally come home. The German women received the news quietly. Some wept for defeated homeland. Others felt secret relief. The madness was finally finished. That evening, the mess hall served a special dinner. Extra peanut butter for everyone. No rationing. Jars on every table, open and overflowing. Guard Betty raised a jar in a strange toast. "To peace," she said. "May we never need prison camps again." Helga lifted her own spoonful of peanut butter. "To peace," she repeated in careful English. "And to plenty?" The word felt foreign on her tongue. But perhaps, she thought, it was a word worth learning. The war ended, but the women remained. Repatriation took time. Ships needed for soldiers first, then supplies, then prisoners. German women were low priority. They waited through summer 1945, then autumn, then winter. Helga spent 18 months at Camp Aliceville. She learned English, she worked in the library, she ate peanut butter almost every day. And slowly the camp became less like a prison and more like an interruption between two lives. The Germany she had left no longer existed. Letters arrived from home with devastating news. Stuttgart was destroyed. Bombs had turned her neighborhood into rubble. Her apartment building was gone. Her father was dead. Her mother lived with relatives in the countryside, eating whatever she could find. "There is no food," her mother wrote. "We survive on potatoes and hope. The Americans give us some rations, but it is never enough. People are thin like ghosts. I dream about bread every night." Helga read the letter while eating peanut butter on white bread. The contrast felt obscene. She was eating abundance while her mother starved in the ruins of a defeated nation. Guilt became the prisoner's constant companion. "We live better than our families," Ingrid said one night. "We eat while they starve. We sleep in beds while they sleep in basements. What kind of people are we?" But staying was not a choice. Transportation came when transportation came. In January 1947, the repatriation orders finally arrived. 31 women would return to Germany. 3 chose to stay in America through special petitions. They had nothing to return to and small opportunities opening in the United States. Helga was among the 31 going home. The night before departure, the American staff organized a farewell dinner. The mess hall was decorated with paper flowers. Extra food was prepared. And on every table sat more jars of peanut butter than the women had ever seen at once. "Take them," Guard Betty said. "Take as many as you can carry. You'll need them." The women packed peanut butter into their bags alongside clothes and letters. Helga took 4 jars. Maria took 6. Ingrid wrapped hers carefully in cloth like precious jewelry. Dorothy gave Helga a special gift, a handwritten recipe card in simple English. How to make peanut butter. Below it, Dorothy had written, "For when you have peanuts again, for when life is normal again." Helga held the card and cried. Normal seemed enemies. Maria, who had returned to Munich, wrote, "I saw children eating peanut butter today. American soldiers gave it to them. The children made faces at first, then smiled. It reminded me of us, refusing at first, then understanding, then grateful. History repeats itself in the strangest ways." By 1950, West Germany was rebuilding. American Marshall Plan money flowed in. Factories reopened, shops filled with goods. Life slowly returned to something resembling normal. Peanut butter appeared in German stores, imported from America at first, then produced locally by German companies copying American methods. It never became as popular as in America, but it found its place on German shelves. Helga bought a jar in 1951, German-made but American-inspired. She opened it, and the smell transported her immediately. Alabama spring, mess hall tables, Dorothy's smile, Betty's kindness. The strange period when enemies became something closer to friends. She wrote a letter to Camp Aliceville. She did not know if anyone would read it. The camp had closed in 1946, but she wrote anyway. "You fed us peanut butter like it was nothing special. For you, it was ordinary. For us, it was proof that everything we believed was built on lies. You showed us abundance when we expected cruelty. You gave us kindness when we deserved punishment. The peanut butter was not just food, it was education. It taught us that the world was different than we had been told. Thank you for that lesson. It was harder than any punishment, but more valuable than any mercy." She never received a reply, but writing the letter brought closure. Years later, Helga told her grandchildren about the war, about being a prisoner in America, about the strange brown paste that changed everything. "What did you learn?" her grandson asked. Helga thought carefully before answering. "I learned that truth tastes different than propaganda. Propaganda is thin, like watered soup, but truth is thick and rich and fills you up, like peanut butter. Once you taste real truth, you cannot go back to believing comfortable lies." The lesson was simple but profound. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is not violence. It is casual abundance shared without thought. It is kindness given to enemies. It is ordinary plenty that reveals extraordinary lies. America's greatest victory was not military. It was showing starving prisoners that everything their leaders told them was false, one peanut butter jar at a time. In the end, they came as enemies. They left as students, and what they learned could not be far away. The ship departed from Mobile Bay on a cold February morning. The women stood on deck, watching America disappear. Some cried, others stood silent. A few waved at the guards who had come to see them off. "I never thought I would be sad to leave a prison," Ingrid said. "It stopped being a prison," Helga replied. "It became something else. I do not know what to call it." The journey across the Atlantic took 12 days. The women rationed their peanut butter carefully, 1 spoonful per day, enough to make it last until they reached home. Home was not what they remembered. Hamburg was destroyed. Berlin was divided. Cities across Germany were landscapes of broken stone and desperate people. Millions homeless, millions hungry. The victorious Allies administered zones of occupation, American, British, French, and Soviet sectors, carved up the nation like a pie. Helga arrived in Stuttgart in March 1947. The train station still stood, damaged but functional. She walked through streets she no longer recognized. Rubble everywhere. Buildings collapsed into themselves, people moving through ruins like ghosts, searching for their former lives. Her mother had aged 20 years in 3. They held each other and wept without words. That night, Helga opened 1 jar of peanut butter. She spread it on dark bread, the only kind available. Her mother tasted it cautiously. "This is American?" she asked. "Yes, they eat it every day. Even prisoners ate it every day." Her mother chewed slowly. Her eyes filled with tears. "We were told they had nothing," she whispered. "The radio said Americans were starving. The newspapers said their cities were falling apart." She took another small bite. "But this tastes like wealth, like abundance." "Because it is," Helga said. "Everything we were told was backwards. They have everything, we have nothing. That is the truth." The peanut butter lasted 2 months. Helga made it stretch by eating tiny portions. Each taste brought memories of Alabama, clean barracks, full plates, American guards who became friends. In 1948, the Berlin airlift began. Soviet forces blockaded West Berlin. American planes flew supplies into the city. Food, coal, medicine. Day after day, night after night, American planes landed with cargo that kept 2 million Germans alive. Among the supplies were jars of peanut butter. Helga heard about it through letters from women in Berlin, former prisoners who recognized the jars immediately. American abundance feeding German civilians who had once been enemies unlearned. The taste of truth stays with you forever. Peanut butter won no battles. It appeared on no victory monuments. Military historians rarely mention it, but for 34 German women held in an Alabama prison camp, it became the weapon that destroyed their faith in Nazi lies. They had been taught that America was weak, broken, and starving. Then they were fed abundance, so casual that guards ate the same meals, so plentiful that prisoners could trade it like currency, so ordinary that American children ate it every day without thinking. The contrast shattered propaganda more effectively than any lecture or film. You cannot argue with a full stomach. You cannot deny abundance when you taste it on your tongue. The women carried those lessons home to a destroyed Germany. They carried memories of enemies who became friends, and they carried the knowledge that their leaders had lied about everything, proven not by documents or speeches, but by jars of brown paste made from surplus peanuts. Sometimes the truth does not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives quietly, spreadable, and slightly sticky. And sometimes that is exactly what changes the world.